Well, welcome, and I'm speaking now with Louise McGrath, who's the International Engagement Manager with the Australia Industry Group. Thanks so much for your time, Louise. And we're talking about the piece that you wrote for Disruptive Asia for the Asia Society. You touch on the role of trade and manufacturing. Just wondering particularly, when we're looking at Indonesia, what are some aspects of that industry that you think are working at the moment?
So I think there's a lot of opportunities for Australian companies in agribusiness. 40% of manufacturing is agribusiness based, whether it's food, nutraceuticals, skincare, right across the range. So any of those industries and products where Australia's regulatory regime is so strong, and that's really our comparative advantage when looking at lower cost economies, but also our traditional strengths in mining, machinery, all that heavy industry. There is still a lot of connection between the two economies.
So is that well understood, do you think, across the industry, that these strengths exist and we can build on them?
I think within pockets of industry, so certainly within mining, there's always a big push. Mining Indonesia is on the Australian calendar. There's a lot of, Indonesian pull into the Australian market, and because obviously the proximity of Perth, where a lot of mining expertise sits, to Indonesia makes a big difference.
And the agribusiness bit is interesting as well, given the demand that's growing in Indonesia for food and food that is more processed as well.
So certainly processed dairy, any protein is certainly in demand.
Now, would it be fair to say then that it's in that agribusiness sector, when it comes to manufacturing, that you think the most opportunities exist at the moment?
There's certainly a lot of opportunities, but as I say in the article, sometimes the regulatory regime in Indonesia doesn't quite meet the opportunities. And one of the really good things under the IA-CEPA negotiations was that we've managed to get a project with Australian standards and the Indonesian standards body to track and to map all the standards across the two countries and work out where they met international standards and where we could do some cooperation. Because it's those behind the border barriers that really make a difference to companies. One example is a member who makes chocolate-coated honeycomb, and had a great opportunity in Indonesia because a company they were doing business with in terms of buying something from wanted to buy their product, but they discovered that unless the honeycomb is connected to a biscuit, it's not able to be sold to an Indonesian consumer. So apparently there's a whole black market on Maltesers. I don't know, you would know better.
Right.
Living in Indonesia.
Touch that.
And that's not necessarily, there's someone's made a mistake. It's just a mismatch in regulations. I can't believe that Indonesian consumers are somehow, endangered. But it's those sorts of things, and that's why that project was so important and such a great outcome under IA-CEPA, even though we haven't obviously signed the agreement yet.
And just having those conversations, surely that must make a difference too, do you?
Yes, well, the Australian government really did a great thing in the negotiations. They created an Indonesian Business Working Group, Indonesian-Australia Business Working Group. So on the Australian side, there was the Australian Industry Group, the Australian Chamber of Commerce, and the Australia-Indonesian Business Council, and our reciprocal bodies, 3 bodies in Indonesia. And we met many times, compared what we wanted in an FTA, and just hearing the Indonesian perspective on things like standards and data control and all that sort of thing really meant that then the input we gave to our negotiators was more fulsome and informed, and was probably helpful in getting that final result.
And you learned a lot from the sounds of it?
Oh yes, quite a lot. We did. The Indonesian side did a lot of industry engagement, and when you translated all the comments, you realise we're not actually a priority market for a lot of Indonesian companies.
Okay, well there's something in itself, isn't it? So, Australia is lauded for how it can move ahead and how advanced it is, but it really needs to get in there and make the most of that.
Well, and again, I don't want to harp on about standards, but again, our own standards regime can be improved, and quite rightly, a lot of Indonesian companies said, why would we meet Australian standards for such a small market? If they're going to internationalise, it's better to have global standards or European or American standards, which you can't really argue with.
On the subject of trade agreements, we've talked about the Indonesia-Australia one. Another one in the works is RCEP, which is a regional agreement. Now, do you think that could actually have a bigger impact?
I think it could. So RCEP includes all of ASEAN, China, India, Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand. So that equals 30% of global trade on today's figures, 40% of global GDP, and almost half the world's population. And that's ignoring the projections that everyone knows for Asia. So if you compare that to TPP, TPP is barely 14% of global trade, 13% of GDP, and under 8% of the world's population. So although the rules in TPP 11 are quite advanced and it is a groundbreaking FTA, it's not going to have the same reach, and it's not going to have the same impact for the future Australian exporters or traders, because whatever happens with the WTO, the RCEP rules are the ones that are really going to apply to a lot of our trade.
Well, it's been most interesting. There are like 10 things there that we could follow up on, but perhaps another time. Louise McGrath, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Helen.